The first organoid trial in which you grow organoids, so tiny versions of human organs, and then transplant them into a host has begun. If you know me, I've been particularly excited for the medical applications of growing brain organoids. You can grow a human brain organoid separate from a person and then transplant it into the skull of a mouse who's had a portion of their brain removed, and it'll just grow projections and function. But of course, brain organoids are not the only kinds of organoids that can be used. This particular trial is occurring with gut organoids. Problems with ulcerative colitis and other associated conditions result in people losing their bowel and may never have a functional bowel for the rest of their lives. Animal trials with organoids of all kinds, that include liver, kidney, gut epithelium, and of course brain, have been largely successful. This is a slow process and there's a lot of ethical concerns, so making the milestone of actually working with human patients is incredible. We have already seen the first patient to receive grown organoids for epithelial for the gut in 2024. This is the major step towards actually moving to human trials with brain organoids too. They did check to see if the stem cells ended up any place they shouldn't be. Stem cell treatments have been largely unsuccessful over the years. That's where you take stem cells, a cell that can become any kind of cell, and put it into the body in hopes that it'll transform into the associated material. It rarely works well when you're just using stem cells. You see, when our bodies build our structures, it happens when we're still developing as an embryo. You simply aren't making the correct materials to tell your cells to become something as an adult. The only exception is places like our skin or our bone marrow. That is why we often source materials to make organoids from those areas. Now, there are huge ethical concerns when it comes to brain organoids. Brain organoids are hugely invasive. You can actually just grow a brain organoid next to another organoid and they'll develop connections and start communicating. When you transplant them into a brain, they'll make projections right into the brainstem. They'll even grow into a decapitated mouse through the spine and are able to take control of the muscles. They're essentially a fetal brain. When we're talking about transplanting them into humans, there's many issues that we might consider. Would it overgrow? Researchers generally use human brain organoids when they're using mice, but not just because it's applicable to medicine, although that's part of it. When we move from mouse models into humans, we want to have all of the same methods be applicable. This creates a chimera, and yes, we know that mice with human neurons are smarter than mice without human neurons. You can see what a massive chunk of human brain tissue was implanted into that rat's skull. That was done when they were very young. We don't really know how memory works. And if we take it from you and then grow your brain organoids and then put it in your skull, what kind of effects will that have down the line? That also requires us to genetically engineer cells to have healthy material, which is another step. Often transplants from a healthy individual are just a quicker way to get there. So there's a lot of concerns about how to do this in the best possible way. The reason that researchers do these in animals before people is because you get some trial and error. There's a much higher bar for doing no harm when you're experimenting on people, and that's where medical trials come in. We do know that mice with human neurons are more intelligent than regular mice, so there's concerns about what level of consciousness we're playing with. Largely, the applications that brain organoid computers have been applied to are with modeling diseases, and that's a really important area. If you have a brain organoid computer, you can give it medication, you can monitor its progression as it develops. It's not just used for mad science computation and trying to make conscious robots, although that is part of it too. This is why this stuff is done. There are ethical concerns, those are very real. AI-enabled organoids, there's a great question of what level of consciousness they could reach and at what point we want to shut it down. In fact, the first researchers to discover that brain organoids had brain waves did, briefly, shut the research down because there were questions about whether or not it was ethical at all. People constantly ask about the ethics of the matter. And yes, there are people who are concerned about this. First, in science, you have to minimize the harm you do to a live patient. Brain organoids as of now have no rights. They're not considered conscious. There is an argument for sentience. The concerns are largely when it comes to making chimeras. If you make a mouse that's more intelligent because it has human brains, does that mouse get more rights than other mice? This is something that humanity has never had to deal with before, so it's very much an open question. I'm also still pondering the issue that if you were to take a healthy donor stem cells to put into your brain, would that change your personality? We do know that implanting human brain organoids in mice and rats can change their behavior. And that goes beyond just, damaging their brain. Their behavior is significantly different. They can recover deficits. I found the concept of recovering from microcephaly a really interesting concept. Granted, this one was specifically studying stroke research where a portion of the brain was removed. If a child was born without their complete brain, could you actually bring in brain organoids to recover? It would probably help. We're getting very close to doing human trials, and I think that brain organoid transplants will do a world of good. We've seen it useful in so many different areas, including Parkinson's research. This will be good for humanity. It does have a lot of ethical concerns, and fortunately those are being considered. It does have a weird factor, though. I will not deny it. It is fascinating.